Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Seeds and Weeds podcast. Are you a gardener, forager, herbalist? Maybe you're just a little plant curious. Well, you've come to the right place. This is Seeds and Weeds. Howdy, friends. Welcome back to the show. Today's episode is all about herbs, growing, foraging, and buying herbs. And we're going to kind of explore these three different ways that we can get our hands on these groovy little plants and see which way is the best for you. We're going to be sitting down with some industry experts to get their insights as well. And we are just excited to be talking about herbs today on the podcast. Heather's here with us, of course. So before we get started, Heather, what is new around Small House Farm?
Well, we've just been doing a lot of transplanting. As the plants keep growing, we got to keep potting them up in different pots. And here in central Michigan, it still really isn't warm enough for some of our really warm season crops. So we need to keep them in the greenhouse. And some mornings we've even had to, take them inside.
That's true. We got to keep those plants protected. Another fun thing that we've been doing out in the garden is I've been working on building a stone wall. Not a super big wall or anything exciting like that, more of a retaining wall. But we're building a new garden to feature a number of native plants. And I thought a small stone wall would be a cool focal point for the garden. So I've been working on that. I just got it finished, actually. And it was a lot of fun. I've never done anything like that before, but I really enjoyed it. It was a challenge, most certainly, but I loved it so much. It was such a fun thing to do. And I think the wall came out really nice.
It looks really great.
I've also been kind of celebrating because we're reaching the end of the spring tour. I've been on the road promoting herbs in every season. We've been doing a lot of garden workshops and programs and that sort of thing. This spring alone, we did 45 workshops.
Yeah, it was crazy. He's been on the road a lot. So, and it's hard at this time of year because we really want to be in the garden, which Michigan thankfully hasn't been too warm. So it's been, it's okay that he's on the road, but we're ready and Michigan's almost ready to let us get everything, planted and growing.
Yeah, so that's really nice. A couple weeks, things are going to kick off for me again right at the beginning of June. The first weekend of June, I'm actually going to go to Seattle. I'm really excited about this. I'm headed to the Mountain Rose Herb Store in Seattle. We're going to do a tea tasting and a book signing. It's going to be so much fun, but I'm not going to get too far ahead with that. Right now, I just got to be here in the moment and enjoy this time at home. We've earned it. It's peaceful. It's great to be out in the gardens and just to spend some time together. So that's been really, really nice.
Super exciting. And we also just a couple weeks ago had our first Patreon exclusive live event. So if you hadn't heard about that, if you were a part of our Patreon membership community, you got a special invite. We did a live YouTube event and we had really great participation. It was awesome to get together, talk spring, talk gardening, answer questions, and we did a big tea tasting.
Yeah, it was super cool. And I was really surprised at how many people were able to join us live for that, especially for our first one. I didn't know what to expect, really. And the turnout was great and everybody was really interactive. So we got to chat with folks and we did a tea tasting. So kind of like the first episode of this season's first episode of the podcast, how we did that tea tasting, kind of like that. And it was a great time. And so it's on YouTube now, so everybody can enjoy it. It's not live anymore, but I'll put the link for it down in the show notes if you want to check it out. It's a fun garden chat and we answer a lot of people's questions. And it was really a super cool thing to do. I'm sure we're going to do it again. We got a lot of, good feedback. A lot of people want to do it again. Probably not anytime soon just because it's such a busy time of year. But when we get a chance, it'd be cool to kind of, get out there and do that again because it was fun. While we're talking about the Patreon, of course, got to give some shout outs to all the new patrons, all the new members. And there are actually quite a few of them since last month that have joined us. So right off the top, we're going to do it. Ready? Julie Thomas, Janelle Gonea, Madhu Gata, Karen King Orozco, Angie Dees, Amina, Renee Woods, Sheila Salmons, Margarita Brady, Angel Leach, and Sandra Branstra. Thank you all so much for being a part of our community. We're just so thankful for your support. Our patrons enjoy a number of perks, things like that live event that they got to participate in, all sorts of cool stuff. You've heard us talk about it so many different times, but it's their support that helps us do so many awesome things at Small House, including this podcast. So if you enjoy the podcast and you want to support the work that we're doing here, please consider joining our Patreon community. As always, the link to the community is down in the show notes. That's where we're going to put all the links for all the things that we talk about today. If you'd like, you can just go straight to patreon.com/smallhousefarm, and you'll be able to find it there as well. All right, so let's dig into the topic of the day. Like I said, we're going to be talking about growing, foraging, and buying herbs, and explore these different options and see which one, when, and how it may be most suited for what you're trying to do here. So, of course, we're going to start with growing, because when it comes to getting my hands on some herbs, my favorite way to do it is by growing them. So what are some good reasons we might want to grow our own herbs, Heather?
Well, the most obvious reason is that it's the freshest option. So if I get to walk right out the door and pick basil to go into my pasta, it is going to be the freshest. I could go to the grocery store and I could get a little container of basil that was picked days ago, and it's just not going to be as fresh. The flavor will be not as vibrant, the cost is higher, and it just doesn't taste as good.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes you might go to the grocery store to get that basil and they're not even going to have it, and then you're just going to be disappointed. And if you got basil growing in your own garden, you will never be disappointed. Another good reason to grow herbs is just because they're so accessible. They're right outside the door. You know, you can just step outside the door, reach out the window, whatever it might be, and pick some delicious herbs to use. And I find I'm using them a lot more than I would if I had to go get them. You know what I mean? If they're right there, I'm going to use tons of it. Like basil. There's another, I use so much basil in the summertime just because I've got it accessible to me. I'm using so many herbs in so many ways just because I've got it right at my fingertips.
I think thyme is a good example of that. I don't think I've ever in my life bought thyme at the grocery store, but having it in the garden makes it something that I reach for and I put in dishes and I use. So sometimes it's nice to grow the herbs that you know you will use, but then also push yourself to grow some herbs that you didn't know you were going to use, you know, and so that you can start incorporating them into your food.
Yeah, that's a very cool way to explore new plants, is by growing them in your garden most often. And we're going to get a lot more diversity in the garden than we would be able to at the grocery store. But even on that same note, let's flip it over a little bit. We might have more options for different herbs in our gardens than we would even from the wild. You know, the native plants to grow around me, certainly they're awesome, and we'll talk about foraging in a little bit. But by growing herbs, I can grow plants here, well, let's say quote unquote exotic plants that don't grow in my region, like all these members of the mint family, you know, things like, well, peppermint and spearmint and the thyme and the basil and oregano and all these awesome things that we want to use. Well, they're not growing around me. I can't go foraging for them. So if I want to enjoy them, well, I have to grow them in the garden.
Definitely. And actually, there's some really cool varieties that you would never even find in the grocery store either. You know, like, gosh, there's a peppermint variety for everything, a pineapple peppermint.
Chocolate mint, apple mint. Oh my gosh.
That's super fun. So
it is fun. That's it. It's fun. And that's another good reason to garden. It's fun. It's relaxing. You've got just beautiful stuff right outside your door. It's really, really cool. And plus these herbs, they're companions to our garden vegetables, right? We can think of it that way. There's a pro to growing herbs, is, you know, for the vegetables, bringing in these pollinators and all that sort of thing.
And some herbs actually help repel bugs or help the soil in some ways to help these other plants. The companion aspect of that, like a tomato, if you grow a marigold, isn't it a marigold or calendula next to a tomato, that it just somehow is helping that tomato grow?
Sure, it helps with the nematodes in the soil. Absolutely, right? So these plants are actually going to benefit each other more than just in their beautiful appearance next to each other, but they're actually working together to grow better. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it also gives us this opportunity to have access to plants that we just would not be able to have access to, I don't think, any other way. Some examples that jump to mind, of course, would be things like calendula or chamomile. If I want to have those herbs fresh, where do I get them from?
I don't know. You could find them dry.
Sure.
And you may be able to find them dry, definitely online, and you may be able to find them dry at your market. But fresh, I have never seen fresh chamomile anywhere.
I don't remember ever seeing it except for in my garden.
So that's definitely a good reason to grow some certain plants.
Now, if we want to move into the foraging, let's start thinking about these wild plants that are around us. When we forage, this gives us the opportunity to make use of all of these native and wild plants that we can find all over the place. And so many wonderful herbs that we're going to have access to just here from the wild. You know what I mean? Things like monarda, or I mean, obviously we could say the dandelion, or how about wintergreen? These are all great plants. They are just growing wild all around us.
It actually becomes a tradition for us to forage certain things at certain times of the year. So around the 4th of July holiday, we know that elderflower will be blooming around that time. Within a mile to 2 mile radius, it is all over around us. So we will seek that out, and it's fun and rewarding, and it's an adventure, and the kids get involved, and foraging becomes a really fun activity.
It's a lifestyle, we become in tune with the seasons in a new way when we're foraging these plants. You know what I mean? When we do, like you say, we have these rituals and these traditions where every year we go out and gather these plants. I mean, forever we would always go to gather Monarda. It grows down by the river, we'd go and pick it. But I mean, in recent years, we have brought Monarda closer to the home. So this is a wild native plant that we are now cultivating in our garden. So there's a little overlap here in the way that we have access to this herb. But that's not something that we could do with all the wild plants. Some of them might be really difficult to grow in my personal location just because of my space or the environment that I live in, maybe like an herb like sumac, right? Staghorn sumac is a plant that we love to work with, but it's not necessarily going to be able to thrive here at Small House Farm. So to have access to it, I got to learn how to forage it. I got to find it, identify it, learn when it's going to be ready to pick. You know what I mean? And that's fun too, to be able to learn those things. It's cool just to learn more about the plants in your wild spaces.
We've already talked heavily on the podcast about dandelion and violet and plantain, but those are obviously some really great examples of foraging plants that you'll find in any neighborhood and in the countryside. Those are all plants that are forageable and easily accessible.
I think this is an important thing to mention. Not everybody's got a place to garden, right? Not everybody's got the room for it or even necessarily the time for it. Everybody's busy. Maybe, you live in the city or something like that, but you can still have access to these wonderful herbs in a number of ways, whether we're foraging them or purchasing them, which we're coming to next. In my book, Herbs in Every Season, half of the plants, I bet it's half the plants that I write about in that book are wild plants, because I kind of wanted to illustrate that you don't have to be a gardener to enjoy all of these wonderful herbs and all of the wonderful things that these herbs offer us, you know what I mean? That is accessible to all people. There's something rewarding about foraging, You can stay in tune with the natural world, you can enjoy these plants, and you can kind of do it on your own time, when it's convenient for you. So that's really nice. I think if we're going to talk about foraging, though, we do have to take a moment to just, a little bit about responsible foraging, being responsible and safe while we're out there. That's an important thing that we should mention.
So you obviously want to always be aware of where that plant is being grown. Like, has somebody sprayed the property nearby? Is there too much car traffic nearby that you're getting a lot of car discharge and things that you wouldn't want to on the plants that you're about to, especially if you're about to consume them? Being aware of is the property private? Is it okay to get on that property and harvest?
And we want to make sure that we're not over harvesting these areas, right? And now the typical rule you're going to hear is it's like the 1/3 rule, never harvest more than 1/3 of the wild plants that you find. And I suppose that's decent advice, but with more and more people getting out there and getting into these wild places, I think we might have to rethink that advice and maybe tweak it a little bit, fine tune it, because if I go to a place and I'm being responsible, I only harvest 1/3 of what's there. And then, Heather shows up behind me. She harvests 1/3 of what's there. And then maybe you find the patch and you show up and you harvest 1/3 of what's there. We're all trying to be responsible. We're all trying to do the right thing, but 1/3 on 1/3 on 1/3, eventually we're going to overharvest this area anyways. So I think a more sensible rule would be something like only harvest what you're going to use. Be sparing with what you take from nature. You know what I mean? You don't want to take too much. You want to consider the fact that there's probably somebody right behind you that's going to come and take some too. So make sure there's enough for everybody there. And then the third and just as important point here to make is when we're harvesting plants, we have to properly identify these plants. This is critical, right? I mean, many of the plants that we're working with are harmless and it's no big deal, and there's not necessarily toxic lookalikes for them, but that's not always the case. That's not always the case. And sometimes you could come across some plants that, if you don't properly identify them, could be a disaster. So that's very, very important. Last year on the show, we had George Barnett as a guest. Now, George Barnett was on the show. It was last spring. He was here to talk about his new book, Foraging Kentucky. It was spring, so we were all excited about foraging. So he and I had a great time, great conversation. Believe it or not, guess what? The link is down in the show notes if you want to check out the full episode. But we thought, some of that, what we talked about with George was so insightful. We got a few clips from the conversation we thought that we would bring back here and share with all of you. George, not only is he the author of Foraging Kentucky, but he also owns and operates the Hungry Forager, which is an educational program which is focused on teaching people about wild edibles, ethnobotany, ecology. And you know what? He's got some great advice for foragers.
To look at foraging like a discipline of becoming an amateur botanist or an amateur mycologist, in that learn the actual plants, be able to properly ID them just for the purpose of identifying them with confidence firsthand. And then once you have that knowledge, then foraging makes sense. Then there's the opportunity for foraging.
Absolutely. Throughout the conversation, he kept coming back to these 4 words of wisdom he repeated throughout the entire episode.
Observe first, harvest second.
And then something that we teach that George also talks about a lot is really investing in your neighborhood, looking around you, being aware of the plants that are growing right in your neighborhood that are forageable. I mean, maybe there's a bunch of redbud growing. Maybe there's some really cool hawthorn trees and you didn't even realize, but we want to get invested in our communities.
I just really encourage people to get invested with where you live and learn about the ecology of the landscapes, learn about the management of some of those more public spaces where foraging is allowed, but also be really cognizant that in today's world, a lot of places are managed with herbicide. And so I would say today, unfortunately, it's just as important today to know what areas are being sprayed with herbicide as the identification of the actual plant itself in ways.
I think spring is a very exciting time for foraging. And George thinks so too.
Spring is just a really busy, exciting time. It's a great time to actually get into foraging as far as the spring season. I mean, it's one of the seasons where you can watch a couple plants in your own yard go through a life cycle and you can interact with them on a daily basis to kind of get familiar with them. That honestly itself is a key right there to getting into foraging for people that are new to it, is to try to find what's close to you that you can access on a daily basis to actually witness it, watch it regularly, and then be able to harvest it and know that it's, growing in an area, let's say if it's a plant that hasn't been sprayed or isn't in an area that might be contaminated. I mean, that's like an absolute win-win situation.
Now that brings us to our third manner of herb acquisition, if you will, purchasing herbs. So let's explore some of the reasons, Heather, why we might choose to purchase herbs.
Well, one of the most basic reasons is that a lot of herbs could be hard to grow for you, either because of your space constraints or because of your climate.
Sure. An example that jumps to mind for me right away, of course, is arnica. Arnica is an herb that I enjoy working with. It's a well-known plant, most certainly. But where we are at here in Michigan, I can't really grow it effectively and get it to flower. It's a plant that prefers higher altitudes than where we're at. And so I'm just in the wrong ecosystem to grow arnica. As much as I might want to, it's not necessarily something that I can do. And right along that same line, I think would be some more of these exotic spices. We could say like cinnamon and cloves or cardamom. I would love to have them. I want to use them. There is just no way in heck I'm growing these things in Michigan. You know what I mean? So I'm going to be purchasing them, guaranteed.
But another good reason to purchase is that because you need a quantity that is larger than you will ever be able to grow. So in those situations, you may need to buy a big giant bag of chamomile or a big giant bag of calendula because you just haven't had the opportunity to grow that much or the space to grow what you need, or so on and so forth.
Sometimes it's just too much work to process all that stuff. If you're going to be using a lot of, say, like chicory root or dandelion root or something, I mean, first you have to be able to find enough of the plant. You got to dig it up. You got to hope you got enough root. You got to wash it. You got to chop it. You got to dry it, yada, yada, yada. It can become quite a chore in order to do that. And that may not work for your lifestyle. You may not be able to do that. You may not even have the space or the time for that to be gardening or foraging or whatever it might be. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy these herbs. Right? You can still go out and purchase these plants. I know that sometimes we want to be like completely independent and, I'm going to do it myself and I'm going to grow my own. And, and that's cool. That absolutely is totally awesome. But we have to be realistic with the fact that that is not always an option. It's not an option for everybody. It's not always an option for us. So we just have to say, hey, you know what? Sometimes I got to go buy some herbs, and that's totally all right. You know what I mean? But if you're going to go and buy herbs, you want to make sure you're buying the good stuff. You got to ensure that you're getting quality plants. So when you're shopping around, I mean, it can get confusing. There's a lot of suppliers out there. There's a lot of information you got to sort through to find out if you're getting the good stuff or not. A lot of different labels on these things, and it's like, it could get confusing. So I thought it'd be really nice. Let's bring an expert in. You know what I mean? Let's talk to somebody that knows this topic very well so they can kind of explain all of this information to us. And I thought, well, who better than some of our friends from Mountain Rose Herbs to get them in here and talk to us about these plants. We love working with Mountain Rose Herbs. They have a serious commitment to quality.
We focus on sourcing not only organic, but also ethically harvested, ethically sustainable product from around the world. And we really work quite closely with the farmer in making sure that that not only the product that we're getting is the highest quality, but that what they're able to do on the farm is not only good for the earth, but also good for the people that work there.
So we just heard from Tommy Nevar. He's the vice president of branding for Mountain Rose Herbs. And I thought, boy, if we want to start digging into what these labels mean, nobody's going to know better than Tommy, right? That's his job. He is well versed in all of this lingo. So I said, okay, let's dig into these labels. We all know what organic means. We're very familiar with that. That's a label we see on many, many things. But I've also started to see regenerative organic. And I thought, well, gosh, what's the difference here? What does that mean?
The whole idea behind regenerative is that you're giving back to the soil. You're regenerating that soil and bringing the health of the soil back. So with farming, obviously, there's a lot of depletion that happens. Right? The plant itself is going to take up a lot of minerals, a lot of nutrients, and you have to put that back into the soil. So regenerative organic is focusing on not only the plant being organic, pesticide free, but also focusing on making sure that the soil is healthy and remains healthy.
So that's cool. When you see that label on a product from companies like Mountain Rose Herbs, then you'll know that it's regenerative organic, that the companies know, or they're making sure that the farms are putting that extra effort into their products, that the land itself is still full of life.
Another set of labels I was curious about are fair trade and fair wild.
So with fair trade, you're thinking more about the farmer, and the fair trade would be the farmer and the farm workers having a fair wage, responsible for the land that they're managing. And with fair wild, it's also the same thing. They're also have to have that responsibility of where they're gathering these wild product, but paying them a fair wage as well.
I love this because so many of these labels, are about the plants themselves or how the plants are being grown or taking care of the earth. And obviously that's very, very important. But some of these labels also designate the fact that the workers themselves are being well cared for. And that's just as important, right? We got to take care of these workers so they stay motivated to take good care of these plants all the way down the line for sure. Now, before Tommy and I parted ways, I had to ask him one last question. Why sustainable agriculture and responsible foraging is important, right? I mean, not just to Mountain Rose Herbs, but why is sustainability important to all of us?
So imagine being sustainable, being able to do something so our grandchildren's grandchildren can have the same that we have or more. Maybe it's the most important thing that we as humans can do is to leave this earth better than what we found it.
I absolutely agree with what Tommy is saying here. It's so important that we look at this big picture. It's too easy to maybe fall into the trap when we're just sourcing herbs for ourselves, purchasing herbs online, to think about now and in the moment and getting a deal and whatever it might be. But we have to see that these choices have ramifications that can last, for generations to come. It was really nice to catch up with Tommy and have a chance to chat with him about that. Very insightful, absolutely fantastic. It got me thinking, Heather, now with our herb co-op that we have available to our Patreon community, where is it that we source many of the herbs for that co-op?
So we get most of the herbs from the Frontier Herb Co-op. They are committed to sustainable and organic fair trade options. And on their website, I definitely see very similar labels. Obviously, the organic label, they use the kosher label a lot, fair trade, which they do say that they were the first company to sell fair trade herbs and spices in 2009. So that's pretty cool. Regenerative organic, I see, non-GMO. So they are a really reputable source. And by being a Patreon member, you get access to these herbs and spices by the ounce, only as a Patreon member through our website. So it's kind of cool. And we all become this big buying power together, and we get these really affordable access to plants.
Yeah, affordable is an understatement. I've seen some of the invoices come through from folks that have purchased herbs from the co-op, and let's just say everybody's getting a fantastic deal. And that's part of that power of buying together, that community, so that's really, really neat. So of course, as usual, that link to the co-op is going to be in the show notes. I'm going to put the link to Mountain Rose Herbs down in the show notes as well. You know that we're big fans of theirs. I already mentioned I'm going to be there in June. I'm going to visit them in Seattle first weekend of June. So, it's a company we definitely support. So you can check out their link as well. I think it's an important thing to mention here, how important it is for us as consumers and herb lovers and plant people to be supporting these companies that have chosen to make these responsible choices. You know what I mean? We need to support these companies because they are supporting the earth. They are supporting the growers. They are doing all this work, but they can only continue to do that if we purchase herbs through them, right? We all have to work together. We're all sort of, we're interrelated. We're connected. It's a chain of experience. You know what I mean? Like we have to work together to make this sort of thing happen. And the more that we support these companies, the more they can support the growers that are making the choices that support the earth. And in turn, the earth supports us, so we are able to continue to support these companies, et cetera, et cetera. You see the cycle. We're all connected. It's all the same thing, right? So I hope you enjoyed our little foray into herb acquisition today and all the different ways that you can get your hands on these great plants, you know, to give you the information that you need to make good choices, whether you're growing, foraging, or purchasing herbs, you know, or if you're doing all three or combinations of those, which I think we're all probably going to be doing. When we make good choices, when we get out there and do these things, we can enjoy these high quality herbs for all of our kitchen and apothecary adventures, no matter where we are. Well, what do you know? We've reached the end of yet another show. Thank you to all of you so much for tuning in, and big thanks to Heather for hanging out with us today, and big thanks to George and Tommy for all of the insights that they shared with us about herbs. Remember, if you enjoyed today's program, you can always show your support by joining our community on Patreon. You can find a link to that and so much more at seedsandweedspodcast.com. This episode was edited and produced by all of us here at Small House Farm, and the music we're enjoying right now is Happy Upbeat by Alex Guz. I'm feeling happy and upbeat myself. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, my friends. My name is Bevan Cohen, and we'll see you next time.